This is the All Rev'd Up podcast, and we are here with a special episode honoring the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm Reverend Emmett Price.
And I'm Reverend Irene Monroe, and we come off a brief hiatus to bring you our special MLK episode.
Irene, before we head into a conversation on This Is Who We Are, let's take a moment to thank each and every one of our listeners. We are back just because of you, our listeners. We are so blessed because of your support, your encouragement, your feedback, and your comments. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And I say ditto, but with a tsunami of thanks added to it.
As the new year begins, the two different Americas continue to persist. From police treatment towards rioters at the Capitol to another Black teenager falsely accused of criminality, Black people are experiencing a redux of white supremacy. And folks keep talking about, this is not who we are. This is not who America is. And we're so embarrassed and we're so ashamed. Irene, what's your take on this?
Well, number one is, I want to say Happy New Year to you, Emmett, but I want to say this feels like 2020 2.0. That's number one. I feel I'm still in a elongated version of 2020 here. But let's look at that, this topic. This is who we are. You know, I remember the words of Congressman Elijah Cummings, who said, we're better than this. And we always hear stuff about American exceptionalism. But the interesting thing is when you look at that mob scene going into the Capitol, those paintings, if you've ever been in the Capitol, are paintings of American triumphalism. And the interesting thing that gets me, we always talk about, well, we are a people who like a peaceful exchange of power and government. Now, let's go back to a little bit of history here. Number one, 1861, when Abe Lincoln won his presidency. Instead of a peaceful exchange of power, we actually had the Civil War. But I tell you what, Emmett, this is what really gets me here. We castigated, they just verbally, in many ways, wanted to lynch Colin Kaepernick for taking a knee, calling him unpatriotic for taking a knee because he wanted to bring to our attention police brutality and that, yes, Black lives indeed matter. And, the interesting thing is they say, this is not America. This is America. You know why? Because these people shop at Target. They shop at Walgreens, CVS. Wait. They watch the Super Bowl and they watch Masterpiece Theater. This is very much America. And we saw this. Listen, let's be honest. We saw this when Obama ran, all of a sudden, the Tea Party. We then saw the birther movement. And one of the things that we got to understand here, if our elections are always so peaceful and clean, why are we fighting voter suppression since they gave the Black man the vote supposedly with the 15th Amendment and then supposedly adding on a little more with the Voting Rights Act, and then still, again, we're fighting for a kind of peaceful exchange of power. So, Emmett, I'm really fit to be tied. But I want to say one more thing here, Emmett. Okay, really. I got to say, Emmett, if we had a domestic terrorist law passed in this country, okay, we could then have that would be a sense of accountability. We could also have an anti-lynching bill. That would be a sense of accountability. We can then talk about the Trail of Tears. We can talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre. We can then have the kind of change that we want in America. But again, when it comes to election time, oh honey, they come out of the rafters.
Well, Irene, you gave us a history lesson. My goodness, you went back to the 1800s and brought us all the way through these episodes. I'm just going to do this. I was watching this insurrection, and yes, indeed, it was insurrection. I was just trying to count the Black people. I ain't seen that. I may have got to 6, and many of those were kind of there, instigating and whatnot. But I didn't see in that, sea of thousands of people, thousands of people. So inherently, that reveals that we have two Americas. Dr. King said this in 1967 when he gave his speech, and he gave it a few times, entitled Other America, right? And he talked about the fact that we're at a place now that, you know, we can't not do something. And there's too many people sitting on their tails trying to play the neutral thing. Too many corporations, too many institutional leaders not willing to say something, do something, because money is on the line. They don't want to lose donors. They want to lose supporters. And a population of people that are Black, that are Latinx, that are indigenous, right, are sitting here. We're having to protest against our own genocide.
That's
And
right.
and,
That's
and the
right.
other America is sitting back like, well, we're embarrassed. We're
Yeah.
ashamed. This is not who we are.
And you
Yes,
know
it
what
is.
bothers me, Emmett, here about that protest? Okay, they go mess up the place,
Mhm.
and then the Capitol
Oh Lord.
janitorial team are Black people.
Yeah.
So we're always cleaning up
Mm,
white people's mess.
mm,
But you know, William Faulkner said it best. He said the past is not dead. In fact, it's not even past here. And I think what really bothers me so much about it is that people, white folks, you know, said that, oh, I get it about racism when George Floyd died. They
mhm,
said that that was an inflection point.
mhm,
Okay, so what is this here? And the interesting thing, you know, that really gets me, they will say, well, we're making progress because, you know, we did have a moment of post-racial America with Obama. Now we got, you know, a sister in the house, you know, with Kamala. So
mhm.
many people will be in denial and say, yes, this is about those people, but you know, you have to tell white people this, that there's a difference between not being racist
Mhm.
and being anti-racist, and that's action here.
But
And
let
what we got to understand is that, sure, white people, of course they want a peaceful exchange of power, just as long as Black folks are not in that sphere of power during that, for that change.
let me tell you what this is. This this is a coming out party, because you saw the Confederate flags, you saw the Nazi insignia on the shirts, you saw the Proud Boys, you saw the Proud Gals, you saw some very, very violent individuals. You saw an aggregation of a whole collection of people who were letting you know how they feel,
Yeah.
what they feel, right?
And what they're going to do, and
Yeah,
what they're going to do.
yeah.
Because Emmett, do you remember we had a rehearsal? I guess we weren't paying attention, but the rehearsal was in Detroit when a whole bunch of, you know, white nationalists had rushed the Capitol building with guns,
Mhm.
was going to kidnap the governor of Michigan. We thought it was silly. We also
Yeah, it
had a
was in Lansing, Michigan. Yeah,
Okay,
Lansing,
and we
Michigan.
had another we had a rehearsal with Charlottesville. So, you know,
Mhm.
the point is that this has been going on. We like to think that when the KKK marched in DC in 1925, that that's the past. But you
Mm.
know, the past is very present. And you know what? They've been telling us who we are, who they are, which some folks have just been in denial.
Well, this is us. Now, I still believe in the aspiration of the United States of America. I believe in the aspiration, the goal, the experiment of a representative democracy. I believe in it. But until the populace, until the people, until the citizenry make our minds up that we're not going to stand for this foolishness, and it is indeed foolishness, then this is who we are. And so I invite people to get with it, lean into the reality of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, because a lot of us have been uncomfortable for 401 years.
That's
Come on,
right.
come on over here and hang out with us.
And we got to just do more than be aspirational. We not only talk the talk, we actually got to walk the walk. And
Yeah,
that has been quite difficult.
yeah.
So, you know, after a while, you get sick and tired of talking about the same thing. And it's been over 400 years.
Well, here's what I do when I get sick and tired. I create. I create. And I invite all of us, right, to lean into your creative spirit. If you're a writer, let's write. If you're a culinary genius, let's cook. You know, if you are a painter, let's paint. Let's find an opportunity to lean into our creative spirit, so that we can work some of this stuff out internally. Because what we do know is hurt people hurt people. And so
Mm-hmm.
we need to press into that. So I want to invite our listeners to enjoy this arrangement of We Shall Overcome, featuring my son, Emmett G. Price the fourth on flugelhorn. And we offer this as a gift to our listeners with the hope that it will not only inspire you to have hope and be resilient, but inspire you to action, to
All right.
do something. Let's take a listen.
Amen. Mm-hmm. Okay, I just have to say, whoo, boy, it touches your heart. It's elegiac yet hopeful. It talks about, without words, it talks about the struggle of a people then and even now. Emmett, it is so wonderful to hear this rendition. And what makes it so special is to hear both father and son,
Mhm.
collaborate on this. I mean, and this is before, this is one way of passing the lessons and the music of the civil rights movement here, because your son wasn't even born. You weren't even born. So this is just quite moving in so many ways. So I got a couple of questions, because I want to cry on one level, because I heard this as a child.
Mhm.
during the civil rights movement, and it spoke to me, even though I didn't know the words of the song, and I didn't know the blues and the struggles and the impact of the civil rights movement, in terms of the folks that were, marching, going down on the freedom rides and stuff. And I'm mad because I'm old now. And I'm still struggling. It makes me cry out of nostalgia. It
Mhm.
makes me cry out of anger, but the point what makes me smile is to see this father and son team, collaborate on this piece. So tell
Mhm.
me a couple of things here, because I'm not a musician. What is a flugelhorn?
Yeah.
And when he comes in, when your son comes in, ooh, there is a mellowness about it.
Mhm.
What's that? And what is the inspiration for the song?
Yeah. So thank you so much for your comments. Sometimes when we as musicians create, that is our way of crying, to
Mm,
to do it through the music. So the flugelhorn is a type of a brass instrument that has a wider horn or wider bell, has a wider bore in it. So it has a darker, more mellow, kind of fatter sound than a trumpet. And so many times trumpet players will double on a flugelhorn to get a different sound, just like a tenor saxophonist may double on a soprano saxophone to get a different sound. And so, my son's 17 years old, brilliant musician. One of the things that,
prodigy. Don't just
but
say
all
brilliant.
right,
This is
all
this
right,
is prodigy.
all right,
Okay.
all
All
right.
right.
I'm not gonna fight you on that. One of the things that he's a news junkie, and in many ways, he is more in tune with what's going on than sometimes I am. And so, in part of our conversation in terms of what's going on and how do we deal with it, my responsibility is to say that we as musicians, we've always been intellects. We've always been the folks who have responded to things even before lay people knew what to do about
Mm-hmm.
these things, right? Because they
Mm-hmm.
often turn to the creative arts to see how they should respond and when they should respond. So we had a responsibility to do something and not to just sit on our tailbone and hope it goes away or wish it goes away.
Yeah.
So in many ways, this was our connection and our conversation about
Mm.
how he sees things through his eyes and how I see things through my lens, and then we put it together.
Yeah, I feel like I feel with the piece, and then you got a YouTube version of it, which I really suggest to our listenership to please go watch Emmett and Emmett. Okay, perform this piece on many levels. One is that your fingers are like butter.
Yeah,
On,
thank you.
really on the piano here, and your son, who looks like a typical teenager, the seriousness,
Mhm,
the
mhm,
emoting that comes out of this young soul. I mean,
mhm,
it's like an old soul, playing this song, who has been in the struggle.
mhm,
And so it is just beautiful to see a father and son team. Let me tell you about this song. Another reason why I love this song, and you can tell me more about it, and I know a little bit about the history of the song, but the universality of the song. Now, this is a song, that moved folks from the pews, black church people, from the
mhm,
pews to the picket line. It has galvanized folks, in promoting this message. This is a song, that was heard in the struggle in Northern Ireland, in Tiananmen Square, in the township of Soweto, wherever there was struggle, you would hear this song. And so, so it becomes so much like the civil rights movement. It becomes the blueprint for any struggling group, across the world here. And one of the things about the song is to see how the song sort of morphs over time, because the original song really was a field song,
mhm,
where the slaves would sing, I'll be all right someday. And then a
mhm,
Methodist minister, we know that, we know of his, well, you would know his work better than I would,
mhm,
Charles Albert Tenney. He published this version, and he turned it into We Shall Overcome. It's a moving piece, and then to see, I guess when I hear you folks, you and your son, I hear the musical influence of jazz, some of blues, the folksiness of it. And so maybe I should ask you this question. The civil rights movement music has influenced all genres of music. That's folk, jazz, blues. I think this is one of the songs, and you can correct me because you know the history of the song better than I do. I think this is one of the songs that certainly has hit those various musical genres.
Yeah, I mean, this song, and you're right. It started out as a kind of a field song. Charles Albert Tindley was inspired and published it. He's out of Philadelphia, known as the Prince of Preachers in the Black church, turn of the century. He published it first in 1901 as "I'll Overcome Someday."
Mm-hmm.
And like many civil rights anthems, many of them were church songs. The melody that used text. Sometimes the text was impromptu. It was spontaneously created to talk about that moment. And it worked because many of the people, because they were church folks, knew the melody. And so
Mm-hmm.
when you have "We Shall Overcome," someday, there's so many different verses to that because it depends on where you are and what you're dealing with. And this song has been translated into so many different languages and been used as kind of a song of resistance, a song of resilience, right? A
Mm-hmm.
song of hope. And it's
And
almost like
perseverance.
in perseverance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it becomes, the thing about it is that the legacy of Black expression, not just music, but all creative expression, always builds on itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the songs that come out of slavery, which become the spirituals and the blues, develop into R&B and jazz, develop into, hip hop, develop into, all the kind of styles. And
Well, we
so,
should say they all come out of the church because we
well, I
because we
mean,
come out of the
well,
church.
they come out of the dynamic
Mm-hmm.
spirituality of Black folks, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
before we had churches, and that's
That's
the point. We've always been spiritual beings, right?
mm-hmm.
And so we've understood that. And so, the manifestation of the church, particularly the Black church, as an expression of resilience, also, which
Mm-hmm.
is deeply musical, the way that we preach, the way that we walk, the way that we talk,
That's right.
And so, in that sense, it's a part of who we are,
Yeah.
which is why it
Yeah.
resonates so much.
Yeah. Emmett, it's so interesting here. The civil rights movement has a playlist.
Mhm,
It,
absolutely.
it really, really did. And so, I mean, one of the songs we know is Strange Fruit. That
Mhm,
became a classic with, Billie Holiday.
mhm,
Then one of our favorites, This Little Light of Mine,
mhm,
Keep Your Eyes on the Prize. But, the interesting thing is that, the songs kept going even after King died. But one that we would really get us going. I used to love this. People Get Ready. Okay, by Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions here. But let me tell you though, even so, that was 1965. But King died in 1968. But then the music continued on because the struggle was still going on. In 1973, my favorite group, Emmett, Sweet Honey in the Rock. And a lot of people might not know who they are, but that's an a cappella group of Black women who would sing these, these songs here. And one of my favorite, and this is my favorite, is Ella Baker's song. The reason why I want to share just two lyrics of it with you, Emmett, is because it's the same struggle today. Listen to this. We who believe in freedom cannot rest.
mhm.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes, until the killing of Black men, Black mother's son, is as important as the killing of white men, white mother's son. I love that song.
Mhm.
That's one of my favorite songs post King's death. It's a song that can be even sung today.
Yeah. And, passing that repertoire on to our young people is so important. I mean, that's why I was so moved, by my son's, his own interpretation, of that and our desire to, have him play the flugelhorn, which is different than the trumpet. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a different expression to give that kind of density and that kind of darkness,
And
but
mourning
and
and
mourning.
mourning
Yeah.
elegiac and
Yeah.
it's and all of that, but still I hear a tinge of hope.
There's hope there.
There's a tinge
I
of
mean,
it.
one of the things that I did artistically, in the beginning, there's a journey in this song. We only did three verses of it. We brought him on the third verse, but I ended, almost with the chime of a grandfather clock,
Mm.
which suggests, the time is now, right?
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
and I give really four chimes,
Mhm.
And the beginning of the piece kind of starts kind of with a wondering, movement to try to talk about that, the fact that we seem to be going nowhere,
Right.
and there seems to be no direction.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of that blossoms this notion, deep in my heart, I
Mm-hmm.
do believe, right, that
Mm-hmm.
we shall overcome
And
someday.
it's so encapsulated King's theology, because a lot of people don't know in 1965 he actually preached a sermon,
Yeah.
"We shall overcome."
Mhm.
But we hear it in his very last sermon. We call that "I've been to the mountaintop," when he says that, uh, um, I may not get there with you, but I've looked over and I've seen the promised land, and I want you to know that we as a people will
Mhm.
get to the promised land. And again, that we shall overcome. We shall overcome is always heard actually in so many
Yeah.
of his sermon. And I'm so inspired that song was introduced to me as a child. We used to
Yeah.
sing it in church. Then we sing it and in the protests that would go on. And I'm just hoping that with the Black Lives Matter movement, that they'll bring some of, if not that music of the civil rights movement, they will develop their own music, because
Yeah.
that also galvanized people. That speaks in a way that even words can't even articulate.
Oh yeah, there's music there with the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, these young people are phenomenal. They are creating really at a greater pace than we ever did,
Mm-hmm.
and with great diversity and versatility. What's interesting about "We Shall Overcome" when I learned it, and this to me is the most important part of the song. When I learned it as a young child, singing in the congregation of a church, we always embraced hands, and we
Mm-hmm.
would always cross, our arm over the other, which brings you in close proximity as you hold the other person's hand next to you on your left and your right. And the point about that is that the song starts with we. It's
Mm-hmm.
not I, it's we.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's the esprit de corps and the spirit of this nation.
And the
This
inclusivity of
it
it.
should be we.
Yeah.
This
Yeah. It
this
should
should
be
be a
we.
nation of we's, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We the people. And
Yeah.
I think that that's the important part. And if I can pass that on to my son, and perhaps he can pass it on to others, then I think we'll be doing part of our job. We need to do stuff together to get
Yes,
there.
we do. I can't thank you and your son enough for this wonderful rendition of "We Shall Overcome," particularly now that we're in 2020 2.0.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to debut it here on our podcast. And my son and I offer it as a gift. We hope that it's meaningful, inspiring, encouraging, and perhaps empowering as
And
we move
blessing.
forward.
It's
And
a
blessing,
blessing.
yeah,
It's a
together.
blessing, and it is our benediction.
It is. Thank you. All Rev'd Up is brought to you by us, the Revs, and our amazing producers, Kyla Wright and Cavante Smalls.
Music for this episode is from Emmett G. Price III and Reverend Price's son, the musical prodigy, Emmett G. Price IV.
Now, if you like what you hear, let us know. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts and follow us on All Rev'd Up Pod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Feel free to send us a note, a question, or a comment at allrev'duppod@gmail.com.
We'll be back for season 3 of All Rev'd Up Podcasts in February.